Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Casual Sports Podcast. A new week, and we'll start with the final day in May. Mike, it's been an exciting month. Sports-wise, a little upsetting otherwise. There's been a lot of bad that's gone on this month, and hoping for a new turnaround in June.
Plenty, and let alone just this weekend, we had a lot going on.
Yeah, this past weekend was crazy, both in sports and, outside of it, too.
Yeah, it's been a great month of May. You had both playoffs starting in the month of May. Or actually, basketball starting in April, but you had both going on, the meat of it going on this month. You got baseball starting to heat up. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there is. Well, might as well just get right into it. NBA playoffs, Mike. You and I have been digging into this past couple of days. We know what's been going on. Just an epic Game 7. Finally got a chance to tune in and watch some of it. Got the final 10 minutes of that game, and it was an exciting finish. Came down to the wire. Looked like Boston was going to pull away. They were storming ahead, and then Miami, final couple of minutes, start hitting their shots. And all in all, there was just some really bad play calling in those final couple of minutes of that game. It felt like Boston was playing just so conservative. They just were letting anything happen just by trying to drain the clock. And Marcus Smart needs to know his role, man. Yeah. He should not be out there shooting threes. Play defense. That's what you're there for. Don't go trying to be a hero. Give it out to, Horford or Tatum or Brown. Give it to one of those guys that can work it well on the offensive end. Marcus Smart has his moments. He did have a big shot that helped them, I think, on their own 11-0 run a little bit right before Miami went on theirs to make that comeback right into it. But his shooting in the late game almost cost them. Jason Tatum, when he's going up against Steph Curry in that NBA Finals, he's got to protect that basketball coming down the floor. It does not matter if they bring doubles or triple teams because Golden State's going to. They know how to lock down superstars. They've been doing it for almost a decade at this point. Jason Tatum's going to have to be on his best game. And those final couple minutes in that game, it made me question what this Boston Celtics team can do because they struggle to close. And going up against Golden State, you cannot struggle to close.
I think – especially in that Game 7, there are a lot of takeaways I had, too. Number one was, like you were saying, Marcus Smart, know your role. And you've done it all year. That's why they turned things around after that 23-25 start.
And he had 24 points. He had a great game, almost a double-double as well.
But you're not going to rely on his consistent outside scoring. He's going to get it done inside mid-range, get offensive rebounds, put stuff up in the paint. But he's not a consistent three-point shooter. And Stephen A. was talking about that halftime show and after the show. He's like, look, just play your role. It's gotten you to this point. Your defensive player of the year has gotten you to the conference finals, now the NBA finals. Just play your role. And, that's a big thing, too. And I think down the stretch, especially when I think they were up, 11 or 12 with, a couple minutes left, and Miami made it close. So that's my big thing is that it's harder to play with any team when you have a lead. It's hard to keep your foot on the gas when you have a lead going. They let their foot off the gas. And Miami, they're fortunate Jimmy Butler missed that three, which a lot of people are talking about. They're questioning it. I had no issue with it. But
I did only because I think he had a better play out of it. It was one-on-one with Al Horford in the open floor. So obviously Jimmy Butler's going to have the speed advantage. If he was going to take that three, what I would have liked to see if you're still going for the three is set your feet. He came in running on the move, and I think it took off his timing. They were doing so well because their three-point shooters were getting set before taking it. Jimmy Butler, it kind of just felt like, one of those buzzer-beater shots. He had 18 seconds left on the clock. Don't try and be a hero when there's still time left in the game because if you go do that and you miss like he did, then it opens the door for this question of, you had 17 seconds left. You definitely could have looked for a better shot instead of the one that put up. His teammates said they were fine with it, so that's all dandy, and they're not going to hold it against him. But the fan base better because Jimmy Butler, he's supposed to be that guy. He had a couple good performances to finish things out. But I think what everyone's going to remember from this series was Jimmy Butler missed. He missed the shot. Any other superstar in the league, that gets held against them. So I hope it does the same for Jimmy Butler. He took an ill-advised shot. What I really would have liked to see with him having that speed advantage is when he goes to pull up, Al Horford standing about a 5-foot gap in between him, which is why he launched up that three. What he probably could have done, taken one more step over the three-point line, go for a step back. Al Horford would be forced to come back out because now Jimmy Butler would be able to set up in a shooting position. Al Horford has to close out. then Jimmy Butler would have Al Horford going the opposite direction, with his back to the basket. Jimmy can get that quick first step through and drive to the bucket, and we got a tie ball game with probably 12 seconds left instead of down 2 with 18 seconds left.
My big thing is that
it opens up a whole new scenario, and just based on Jimmy Bucket's skill set, he's not an outside shooter. That's not the strongest part of his game. In a close game like that, I want my best players doing what they're supposed to do. Just like Marcus Smart on the other side needed to be playing defense instead of taking offense into his wheelhouse. He did a good job of it. He got the points he needed to, but down that stretch, it hurt them a little bit and allowed Miami to come back. He needs to focus in on his role at the end of the games and not try and keep it expanded, tighten down, do what you do. And then on the other side, I'm saying the same thing for Jimmy. You go in there, play your game. Your game got you to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Don't go away from your game just because you want to win it. Sometimes it's better to go for the tie and live with the results than, go for the win and it doesn't look as good, because then you have to foul on the other side, free throws. It makes things ugly, not as clean, and it's a dud to the end of a game that was going in a great direction.
I think, I'm going to kind of take away from Eric Spoelstra's post-game comments. Somebody asked him about that shot, and I don't think he directly said it, but I heard it from somewhere that, if Jimmy, two things. If Jimmy either, tries to drive it, Al Horford plays good defense and force him back out to try to set something up offensively, or if they call a timeout in that situation, you're going to make things a half-court game where they couldn't do anything half-court against Boston's defense the whole game. From that perspective, that's why the three's fine, because Jimmy was making them before. Not to get that back into it, but throughout the game he's making them. The game 6, that's my thing. I understand what you're saying. That's not his game, but he was doing it well enough to get to that point where if he takes that 3, I don't care. That's your best player. You live and die if he misses it or makes it. And if things go, like I said, if things go in that half court, they couldn't do anything the whole game. Really, the whole series half court defense against Celtics defense. So from that point of it, I don't mind it.
My only thing is, it's such a tight game. You've made this comeback with Miami, not only, in the game, but in the series. I mean, they were looking at getting the door closed on them a couple games ago. Now, they take game 6, they force game 7. And, I had some inclinations that if they went back to Miami would be able to win this series. And they almost did, because that crowd got behind them in those final few minutes. And my biggest takeaway is, when it mattered most, Jimmy B didn't close, and that's the biggest thing for Miami, I think, coming out of this. No one's getting any younger on this team. They're going to go into next year, and I know Hero and Duncan are going to be, they're 2 younger guys with Bam Adebayo, but if Jimmy Butler's the best guy on this team, he missed the final shot of your season that lost you the game, and he's coming back next year, a year older, him and Kyle Lowry, who sucked in this entire series, by the way. I don't think Miami's going to be back here. Unless they make some massive change-ups with this roster, they're not going to get back here. Boston showed glaring holes in their offensive and defensive game plans. They just gave everybody the blueprint on how to beat Miami. So I think now that we can talk about Miami being out, what they need to do next in this offseason, they need a change-up. They need to roll change things up. I know that's not really probably what the game plan is going to be, but I think if you look at this as an all-in-all scenario, when you lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, you look good and you don't want to change. But the best teams change and the best teams get better because of it. I mean, I think Toronto might be the best example in the Eastern Conference of, they've been there before, they got knocked down, and their decision was, we're going to trade our guy. They traded DeMar DeRozan and fired their head coach, who had just won head coach of the year and maybe one of the biggest, most critical decisions in the history of the recent NBA, and one of the biggest, most scrutinized decisions as well, making that change. They, promote Nick Nurse. They bring in Kawhi and get rid of DeMar and all the question marks that followed. They retooled the team that was in the Eastern Conference. They played great every year. They were a phenomenal team. They were always a 1 or 2 seed. And they made the change-ups, and they wouldn't want a title. If Miami wants to finally win that title, you have to change up, because if you play complacent in today's league, you're not going to make it anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's always room to improve. Even the teams that win.
Even the Nets are a team that probably shouldn't change. They just need a whole year where their guys are healthy, And, they'd be able to make a fine comeback next year and probably get to the Eastern Conference Finals if they can actually go healthy for a whole season and play together. But you're still hearing 1,000 different trade rumors, change-ups. What are they going to do to try and, make this team what it needs to be? And that's, to me, what Miami should really be doing. Don't focus on what you have. Focus on what you can have.
But like I said, even teams that win championships want to improve. Golden State won a championship and they bring in Kevin Durant. Another year later, but they still brought him in after they won a championship. But I think the biggest thing,
NBA Finals, and then they brought in one of the greatest players in the league.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, like you're saying, is you can make an argument Miami needs to get healthy too. I think they do need to bring in an extra piece as well. But if you go from start to finish, from the starting of the year till Sunday when they lost, they have not had a full roster. Victor Oladipo came back off the bench. He came back midseason. Marcus Morris was injured half the year. He didn't even play in this series. Jimmy Butler had that knee injury. Kyle Lowry's been dealing with the hamstring half the good part of the year. So I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but they got to get healthy too. That's another big thing. And that's another big way to judge them. If they're fully healthy and they still lose, bring in another piece. I think they need another one anyways, but then you could for sure say bring another piece. I don't know what that piece is. I guess
but my side on the whole healthy thing is, and I guess this goes for the Nets too. I mean, you see them potentially moving Kyrie Irving, who was a guy who missed out on a lot. They got an injured Ben Simmons, and they're looking for pieces to bring in. Same thing goes for Miami here. Yeah, you had an injured roster, but if you got a bunch of guys that are injury prone, which, we don't know 100% sure yet how those guys are going to develop, but, if they're all injury prone, then you have to find a way to move on from those guys. I know it sucks, and you don't want to move on from some great players, but if you have guys that you can't depend on, one, to play a full season, and two, to be there come postseason because of their injuries, it's the unfortunate part of doing business in the NBA. You have to move on because these teams are here to win championships, not to pay medical bills.
Yeah. That's a good point there. Pay medical bills. They have the money to do it, though.
They have the money, and, it's probably – it's nice for those players. I mean, their contract can't really be moved if they're injured. They kind of get a lock in, and they can't be released in most scenarios unless it's agreed on by both parties. But if I'm Pat Riley with Miami and Eric Spoelstra, this is a team that has shown no problem being the bad guy, right? Miami, they got no problems being the one everybody except that city hates. They like that role. They want to be the bad guys. They don't need to be your superheroes. If you want superheroes, go over to Golden State or Los Angeles or anywhere else. They'll be fine to load you up with big smiles. They've always been a team that has embraced the bad guy role, especially in the last, 15 years. That has been their role of being the bad guy in every storyline. It's time to be the bad guy again. They're getting too many smiles down there. That's a problem. You saw Udonis Haslem and Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo leaving that arena. They were visibly upset, and good, you should be. But at the same time, you got to show up. I mean, no one's got anything to be, terribly upset about. They played decent games. The only one that should be really kicking himself is Kyle Lowry. The rest of those guys should have been leaving mean mugging the press, not crying into their towels or whatever. Yeah, you lost into the Eastern Conference Finals. Come out next year and do something with it. When I saw Miami leave the building, those players coming off the floor, I didn't feel like they were going to be back. Sometimes you see those guys leaving and you went, yeah, you know what? That team's going to be right back here. Miami left, and just their emotions leaving that arena and that game, it didn't give me any confidence that I'm going to see this team back here next year.
And to add your point, I think they can, but to add your point.
Yeah, I mean, they got great players, but health is obviously going to be an issue. And the biggest thing, can Miami just let Haslam retire? For the love of God, he's just taking up a bench
I don't think
spot.
he wants to.
He doesn't want to. Then it's up to Miami to go, look, we're hiring you on as an assistant or something. Just please get off of our bench. You don't do anything. Because he's eating up a roster spot that a team like this could very well use. Well, and I think that's one of the biggest problems we're getting into in sports is we're letting guys just hang around too long. This has been a thing that baseball, I think, is better at. When someone gets up there in age, they go, bye-bye. You can keep your contract. We just don't want you here.
Yeah.
They have no problem, signing guys on for the next 20 years or something and letting them eat $1 million a year on a contract, but they don't want them on the roster.
I think everybody likes that.
The NBA has been so guilty of is letting players just stick around much too long.
And how often do you see too, like a player be on a team for how many years, ended up somewhere else, then ended up getting traded back to the team that he was with for how many years? I feel like it's just full of feel-good stories, and I know he's been there his whole career. If he was there to win another championship, that'd be a huge feel-good story. But like, at what point you gotta get that stuff out the window? To what you're saying,
I will once he gets. This will be his 19th season.
Yeah,
in the NBA, he's 41 years old.
And when's the last time he consistently played? Probably when LeBron was there playing.
This year, he played 13 games, averaged 2.5 points per minute, played 6.4 minutes per game. In 2020, he played a single game. In 2019, he played 4 games. The dude hasn't played more than 20 games since 2015, and that's when he only played 37. His last real full season came back in 2014. And even then, he only averaged 4.2 points per game. This guy is not good enough to warrant eating up a bench spot. Yeah, cool. He's been with you his whole career. Who cares? Is this guy really worth the $2.8 million contract that he has on? You want to go, oh, but he's been here his whole career. I don't know why he's been there his whole career. He's averaged 7.5 points per game. I can go find somebody in the G League to give me that.
And go find a front office spot. Go sit with Alonzo Mourning and Pat Riley. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
It's just that time. I agree with you. It's a lot of times in sports, and we see it a lot in basketball. People just want to hold on. If you want to keep winning, you got to cut some ties. How many times do you often hear these people say it's a business? Well, yeah, it's a business. Do your thing here, and cut ties and move on. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not like we're just going to ignore what you did in the past. We know what you did in the past. You was there for 3 championships, whether you contributed or not. He played, and especially in that first one they won with D Wade and Shaq. He played and he contributed, and he was there playing a little bit with that LeBron era. So we know you've contributed. It's time to move on. You did your duty. It's time to step aside.
Yeah, and I mean,
and I like the attitude he brings because he is part of Heat culture, but that's going to continue. It's not going to go anywhere.
And it's such a tricky situation because you want to be the guy that says, hey, you need to get rid of this guy, but you do. He's one of those guys that this is that retirement year. Him, Carmelo Anthony, it's time. Your course has come to an end. There are so many great players, young great players, that aren't getting their opportunities in the NBA because you got old farts like this that aren't doing anything and they're just sitting there because they can. And I don't understand why a front office would even want this, especially not one contending. If you're a team like Cleveland was and you were content to letting Kevin Love just ride out his career, pay him for the years that he kind of
still contributing.
You're right. And, let him do whatever. If you were a team like Cleveland these last couple of years where you were just tanking, getting ready to build up your roster, then that's one thing. But if you're out there competing for a title like Miami is, you got to cut ties with the old. If you don't have people if you can't contribute, this is their, thought process for young guys. If they can't contribute, you won't be on the team, right? If you got a rookie or second-year guy coming out and only getting you 6 points a game and hardly playing, do you think he's going to be on the roster at the end of the year? No, he's not going to be on the roster by the end of the year. He's getting cut because he's not playing and he's not contributing, and there's nothing beneficial about him being there. And if any Miami fan right now could tell me what is the true benefit of Udonis Haslem on their team, I am open ears to hearing it. If you want to go, oh, well, he's there for the, moral support and his veteran experience. So as a coach.
Yeah.
Put him in a role like that. He doesn't, you only have 15 roster spots in the NBA. 13 of them dress, You got 13 guys to put on a bench. I can't afford one of them to not be playing.
I agree.
And if I need a guy, if I'm coming down to it and I'm getting injuries build up, I've got guys in foul trouble, I need somebody I can pull off the bench and depend on. That's my biggest problem with Miami. They're not building a winning team. They're building, a winning atmosphere, but that atmosphere is only going to last a couple of years because they're building it around old guys. It's the same problem the Lakers are having. We're just kind of seeing it a couple of years earlier. They put together some great players, but they're all in the same spot that we're looking at the Lakers, and the Lakers got criticized because they didn't win it. Miami found ways to win because they're still a little bit younger, but when the going got tough, they weren't there. They did not have the pieces.
And like
they put in some great games, but they were not the right team.
And like I said the other day when Friday,
because they could have won that series.
They could have, and I'm still sitting here
Boston
saying they should
bad
have.
enough that Miami could have won.
Boston played bad enough, but if Miami's, like I said, they weren't healthy, they lost the series. That's what happened. But if I believe they were a little bit healthy, if Kyle Lowry didn't have the hamstring injury, he wouldn't play as garbage as he did, and they were still close. I really think that if they were somewhat more healthy than they were, they could have. I think they were the better team, to be honest with you. I know everybody's saying
despite the fact that they only won, a handful of quarters.
They're the better team.
Yeah, they were the better team, but Boston had things going the right way. They won
Boston's
the right.
Got more shot makers. Boston's got more. I don't want to say that. I mean, those last couple games, especially the ones that Boston or Miami was getting shellacked in, they got outworked, and you don't say that much about Miami Heat teams, especially under Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley. But they did against Boston, and Boston had that right mindset, and they've had the right mindset since January.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, last time this team had a losing record, they were 23-25. Since then, they have lost under double-digit games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 3 of their losses came in the playoffs. I think they had 7 or 9 in total.
Yeah, they've taken off.
They are playing perfect basketball. And I say it every year when we get to the playoffs. You have to be perfect. It's the most impossible thing to ask in sports. On every given day, you have to be your very best. And if you aren't, somebody else will be, and somebody else will send you home to your couch, and you can be the perfect couch potato for the next couple of months. And Boston, they did it perfectly enough. They did enough because Miami couldn't play the way they should have.
And I think the big thing, too, is when we talked about this, too, in previous NBA playoffs, that you do have to have luck. And yeah. I'm not saying Boston didn't earn it, but they're always, if you look at any championship team, there's been luck along the way. They won against a Brooklyn team that was dysfunctional all year. They went against a Milwaukee team that was missing Chris Middleton. They went against a Miami team that was not healthy. And you look at Milwaukee last year. They had to play the Nets without Kyrie Irving. They got past them. Look at Toronto when they beat the Golden State Warriors. They didn't have Kevin Durant or Klay Thompson. Look at the Cavs when they had one game they went all the way. So there's always luck along the way. But nothing to take away from that championship. If Boston ends up winning one, I'm not going to sit here and say they didn't deserve it.
No, because at the end of the day, you still beat the defending champs. You beat the super team. You beat Miami, the favorites coming out of the East. And then, hey, you would have just beat the greatest dynasty in the modern era for basketball in the Golden State Warriors. So, no, this is a very deserved moment if they can eventually capitalize on it. I'm very interested to see if they do. And the one thing giving me hope here against Golden State, I don't have a lot because Golden State exposed every single hole in Dallas in that last series. And it makes me very nervous to pick against them here, especially with their championship experience and the lack thereof on the other side here for the Celtics. But I heard this during the broadcast last night. Every single member of the starting 5 for Boston was nominated at least once for Defensive Player of the Year.
I did hear that, yeah.
And
that's crazy.
That one stat right there gives me a sliver of hope that they have the defensive mindset that they won't stop Golden State. There is no stopping Golden State, but you can slow them down. If you can play great perimeter defense, limit their transition, and just play solid basketball, you can beat Golden State. This year, they aren't an unbeatable team like we've seen in the past. They're a very good team, a very skilled team with great players, great leadership, great athleticism. They've brought in young guys that really fit the system. They fit the roles. And this team reminds me of the New England Patriots with Tom Brady leading the charge. Steph Curry might not always have his best games. I know Tom Brady was not always great in the playoffs, especially the first few rounds. But when you need him the most, those guys show up. And you got great leadership. Steve Kerr, he's probably the greatest coach of our era right now in basketball, much like Bill Belichick could say in the football league. And you come into this with the dynasty on one side, some up-and-comers elsewhere. It feels like you can never count on Golden State to lose. At this point in their dynasty, it's hard to say they're going to lose. And Boston's going to be facing an uphill battle. But we saw Eli Manning a guy that had no business winning a game against Tom Brady, go into the Super Bowl twice and take away titles from the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL and Tom Brady in one of the greatest dynasties we've ever seen in the New England Patriots. Who's to say some ragtag bunch of Celtics led by Jason Tatum and, I'm Udoka, a first-year head coach who we've seen a couple win championships, Nick Nurse, Steve Kerr, Udoka now maybe. It's the cards are there. Huh?
Tyronn Lue.
Yeah, Tyronn Lue. I mean, we've seen a lot of first-year head coaches win championships, and the storyline's writing itself. Every first-year head coach and Steve Kerr win a title has beaten Steve Kerr.
Well,
and I'm just saying, you got a ragtag bunch of Celtics coming in here led by Jason Tatum, who has no business being this guy for this team, but he has been, and he's done it perfectly this season. So if he continues this, I don't see any reason why Boston can't win. I'm not saying it's the likely probability, because more likely than not, Golden State's taking this in 5 games. More likely than not, they are going to dominate this series. After the struggles we saw out of Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals, it is hard to say that we're going to see much of a competition in these NBA Finals. And that's a shame. I hope that's not the case. More likely than not, Golden State's coming in here. But I don't see a reason why Boston can't. If Boston gets back to what got them here, if they play like they did in the Eastern Conference semifinals or the opening rounds, then they can force 7 games against Golden State. I don't know if they can win in Oracle to finish off a Game 7, but if they can take this lead and bring it back to Boston in Game 6, hell yes, Boston can win. Hell to the yes, Boston can win.
Well, since we're kind of moving into the matchup now, I think you could say this about any championship matchup, but I think there's a lot of storylines in this matchup. The Golden State side, you got them, coming back from the 2 years that they were injured, Klay Thompson stuff that they're still somewhat continuing their dynasty of 6 finals in 8 years. Then you go to Boston side that they had that sluggish start 23 and 25, and they've been the best team in basketball since January. The other one that came to my mind is that they're looking to add Banner 18. Take the lead from the Lakers that they're
yeah, and I think that's been one of the funniest storylines. The Lakers, it takes them almost 15 years to get that 8th title since Kobe, and they finally get it. They finally tie Boston. The questions start flying, and we've been waiting for a Lakers and Celtics matchup in the finals, and this felt like maybe the year it could happen, and then the Lakers fall off. Last year felt like it could happen, but the Celtics had a bad year, and now, here comes Boston, a team that hasn't won it since, 2006? 2006, 2008? Yeah, okay, 2008. And here they back are again. As soon as they introduced the Larry Bird Eastern Conference, MVP, finals MVP there, and, of course, Tatum comes home with the win, which I think is kind of, just funny seeing, Celtics get that. But have the Celtics back in here, and they can just reclaim the lead. Granted, they have to beat a great team to do it. But I think it's also funny. The Lakers beat Miami to make it 18. Celtics beat Miami with a chance to make it, one more. So
yeah,
storylines are there. I think it's a lot of fun to look at that side of this.
But I agree with you in terms of Boston's defense. It's good enough to like you said, you're not going to stop Golden State, but it's good enough to limit some things. But I think the big thing is you see a lot of times when the Cavs played them in the finals, when Toronto played them in the finals, any playoff series that they played along this stretch they've gone on, they're going to force you to turn it over and make mistakes, especially in that building when it gets loud. And they're gonna make little things like a transition layup or a dunk or something like in their transition turn the game around. And I don't want to keep sounding like beating the dead horse, but it just keeps going to what I keep saying about Golden State. They're not unstoppable like you said, but I think that they are the better team. And I really they have. But like you said, their personnel, they know how they want to play. They have a great coach, and they have great players. You got to have great players to get to this point.
Yeah, and we've only seen 2 teams beat Golden State in this situation. One was this Cleveland super team led by the greatest athlete of our generation in LeBron James.
One of the greatest point guards, too.
Greatest athlete. I'm not saying greatest player of all time. I'm saying greatest athlete. LeBron James, I think, has earned that distinguished name, that title to have with what we've seen out of him in the last 18 years, with great point guard and great outside shooting. We know Boston can shoot it from outside. We've seen some really great numbers out of them in these playoffs, and that excites me to go into this because you're going to have a three-point barrage from either side. And I know I'm going to count on Golden State to hit more of those. But Boston, they've been out shooting their opponents from downtown pretty much every series so far. So I'm excited to see them do that again. I think they have the chance to. Again, though, it comes down to that defense. The other team we saw beat this Golden State team, an injured Golden State team too, by the way, don't forget that, was Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors. And they did that thanks to the fact that Kawhi can shoot from anywhere on the floor, and they were great at getting second chance opportunities. Boston, Kevon Looney has turned on a whole different monster. In those Western Conference Finals, we saw a Kevon Looney that has never been witnessed before in the NBA. That player that showed up is a completely different monster. And if Kevon Looney is off again, Golden State's taking this in 4. Because if Looney is that dominant of a player, pulling down nearly 20 boards, I know Al Horford's going to give him a lot more than anything that the Mavericks had, and that was a big reason he dominated, is because the Mavericks did not have a center or even a strong forward that could hold their ground against Kevon Looney in that series. But if Looney goes off again this series, there's no chance Boston even has one. But Al Horford and Jason Tatum have to get in there. Marcus Smart's got to get involved in rebounding. Offensive rebounds in this series are going to be huge because, Golden State is not missing on their opportunities down the floor. This happened, when we saw Golden State, 4 years in a row, we learned everything about this team and how they operate in these situations. If you can force Golden State to turn the ball over and you can get second chance opportunities, you can win this game.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
But you have to do it 4 times against them, which is why it's been so hard to see.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to beat them 4 straight times. Or 4 times in a 7-game span. I'll give my prediction on Thursday when it starts, but
yeah,
it's going to be a fun, entertaining series. But between 2 good teams that actually, if you want to be serious here, they do actually play similar.
They're very similar styled. What I think we've been seeing here, especially in the last few games for Boston, once they've had to kind of re-lock in, they were dominating Miami. Game 6 and 7, I think, kind of forced them to retool a little bit and get back to their guns. I think when they did that, their play style was very similar. They're, taking those outside shots, playing great defense, getting rebounds, and they're not afraid to shoot it. And I think that's maybe the one thing, we criticize Marcus Smart shooting up when he shouldn't have in the, end of that last game. But that's the style they won with. They went out there and they won by being ballsy. And you know what? In the NBA Finals, you gotta be that way. There's no time for complacency. If you got a shot, especially against Golden State, you got to take it.
And another thing too,
they're not going to leave you open. They have too much speed. I mean, with Draymond, Looney, Wiggins, Thompson, and Curry, there's so much speed defensively for that unit, and especially once they bring in Jordan Poole or Toscano Anderson or anybody else off that bench for that matter, they're going to be so quick and athletic that you have to have a perfect day to shut them down. Boston, they need time of possession, because if you're going to slow down Golden State, you just have to win time of possession, milk that clock, take them, to the pasture and just let them graze for days. You have to slow this thing down. I think that was part of the success Cleveland had against them and Toronto. They made those games low-scoring affairs. If this hits 100 points or more, if it's going above 100, Golden State is winning. If they could do what they did in Miami these last couple of games and keep them down 80, 90 points, Boston can and will beat Golden State.
Yeah, and the Cavs also show that they could, you don't want to get in track meet with them and try to launch threes like they do. Yeah. Nobody can. But they showed they can score too if you want to go there. But it's pretty interesting, and I think with Marcus Smart, like I was saying, stick to what got you there, like you're saying. But it also goes to what I was saying with Jimmy Butler, that he got you to that point. If he takes that last shot, I'll live with it. Marcus Smart, he's been playing, and they've said in some of their press conferences after that game that we always make it interesting. We always find a hard way. Well, I don't know if that's going to work against Golden State, because you pretty much have to be perfect against them.
Yeah.
So it got you to this point, but it might not get you over the hump.
The only thing I can say about this before, any predictions get made when we go in the next couple of days, and we'll obviously talk a little bit more about this each day, but going into this, I don't really care what the result is, if Golden State wins. The one thing, if Golden State wins it, Steph Curry finally needs to be the Finals MVP. It's the one thing people are holding against him in his entire career, and it is not fair because
who cares,
one, Iguodala should not have been Finals player of the, whatever. He should not have been Finals MVP. That was ridiculous. They went, oh, it's a great defensive effort against LeBron, who averaged a triple-double in that series. So
by himself.
Right, by himself. And my one thing, Steph Curry, he's going to have all the accolades, but he doesn't have that Finals MVP. And I know a lot of people, you just said it doesn't really matter. It does, though. When you go into where he's getting up to, I mean, if he wins this title, it's hard to say he's not up there, one of the greatest players of all time. I know he's had great teams, and that's always going to be held against him. But so did Kobe. So did Michael. So did Magic. They all had great teams around them. They stood out among greatness.
But he had great teams.
Steph Curry, he stands out among greatness. People aren't going to see Klay Thompson. People weren't going to see Kevin Durant. They went to see Steph Curry, the greatest shooter in the game today, maybe of all time. Not today, all time. Steph Curry is the guy that stood out among greats. He didn't always bring home the accolades, especially when he should have. I mean, in my opinion, Steph Curry is the reason Golden State wins. It's like LeBron not winning the MVP every year he was in Cleveland. He was the only reason we were winning. Steph Curry is the reason why Golden State is what it is. If that's any other point guard, even if that's Kyrie Irving, it doesn't matter. They don't win the way they would have if it wasn't for Steph Curry. Steph Curry hits the dagger. Steph Curry puts guys away. This, going along with another title that would match LeBron, the only other player that really can attest to what Curry has done in this decade. He's up there for not only greatest player of our generation, greatest of all time, because of what he's been able to do in the way he stood out among greatness.
And I think the thing with him is that, he's had some great teams, but he started everything there. He was the first guy that drafted in this
and he stayed committed.
Nucleus they have. He stayed committed, like you said, because they stunk when they first drafted him. For a couple years, they stunk. So he created everything that they have in Golden State. You bring in some other guys, you do that along the way. That's part of sports. You got to bring in other guys that help you. And I think that he's still showing that he can still carry a team, not carry them, but lead a team. Because last year he pretty much had to carry them into that play-in position that they were in. He didn't get them out of the play-in tournament, but he got them there. And I think he's probably one of the players now that you could say, hey, he can carry a team, along with some other players. I mean, I don't know if LeBron can still be our best player on the championship team, but I don't know if he can still have guys injured like he did in Cleveland and still carry them there. Because it showed the last couple years in Los Angeles. He didn't have Anthony Davis. He didn't have other guys. He couldn't carry him there. He's just not that. He can't do that anymore. He's been doing it for how long?
He's up there in age, and that's not.
Yeah, that's not his fault.
He can't ask anybody to do that.
Yeah, he did it long enough. He did it more times than you probably say he should have. It just happens, and I think that's what Steph is right now. Is that he can do that.
He's at that point.
Yeah.
So, well, let's transition out of basketball. We hit up the first 40 minutes of the show. We're going to start dropping viewership here and head over into, not the MLB, let's do NHL. We got our finals, Eastern and Western conferences set, and a bit of surprise. Carolina blew their lead, Mike. I know I'm a little surprised by it, but New York, back-to-back series, they've done this now, and now they go in against Tampa. And I know I'm going to still give my edge to Tampa, and I'm going to continue to do it, even though the Rangers have proved me wrong twice in a row. I've been riding high on Tampa for pretty much the whole season. I'm not jumping off now because New York's had a good series. The one thing that's standing out to me, we got put in our group chat earlier today, is New York. They're in the top 5 in the last 16 years in playoff wins, in series wins, and yet they don't have a title. In the last 16 years, they've won.
Want to say who's number 1?
Yeah, the Pens are number 1,
and
you got a handful of titles to go along with it.
Tampa Bay too.
Yeah, Tampa's right behind you, and they got the title, and they're in another hunt. They're going for their third. But this Rangers team, they're up there, top 4 or 5 teams, and they don't win a title. And I think that's a big standout to me. It's the fact that this team, they win the playoffs. Yeah, they can win. Those first 2 rounds, they are theirs. This team doesn't win the finals. It doesn't matter. They are choke artists. As much as we talk about, that belongs to Dallas, New York has just as much of a go for this. I mean, with the Yankees not winning a title in how long, the Rangers, they get here so many years, loaded teams, and they still don't find ways to win it all. Dallas and New York, they got a pretty close head-to-head for choke artists. The only thing is, the only thing that the football side of New York keeps choking is, their draft picks, except for Buffalo, who can't win either. So
I'm trying to find here. I don't even, all them series that they've won that you said. I don't even remember the last time they were in the Stanley Cup final. I'm trying to search that up here because it's been a while for all these series that you said they've won. It's been a long time. Last time the Rangers
by season results here for them, they should be able to
in the finals. Oh, wait. Oh, 2013-14, they played the Kings. So they haven't been in it, but still, that's still almost 10 years by now. But no,
2014-2015, they lost the conference finals to Tampa Bay 3-4, by the way.
Yeah.
After beating Pittsburgh in the first round.
Yeah.
They faced Washington in the second, but gotta throw that back out there. It's leaning kind of the same, and I'm gonna be taking Tampa in this series, so.
I am too. It starts tomorrow night. I don't know how many games I'm going to pick it in. I haven't decided that yet, but with Tampa, I've stayed on the train all year just like you have. I defended them all year, especially against Matt, like I said last week. But I think with the Rangers is that they're barely getting by right now. Two 7-game series are getting worn out. You can argue that they should have lost both those series. They were down 3-1 in Pittsburgh. You should argue that they weren't the better team against Carolina. Carolina was a better team all year. But I think it's going to catch up to them. I do, because they have the strength of the Rangers team is their goaltending with Shesterkin. I gotta believe that Tampa's guys are going to find a way to get to him. Pittsburgh showed they could get to him for a couple of games. They couldn't do it the whole series. But if you can use that for a couple of games here and try to win some other ways, I think that works in Tampa Bay's favor, because you see their offense, they could turn on. They've showed it the last couple of years. They showed it in this playoff so far. They could turn it on. So you got to be ready against them. I just think the Rangers, they might be too tired. They played 14 games so far. Tampa might have some rust coming out. They've been off for a week.
The last series, so don't count them out just yet.
Oh, I'm not, but I'm just saying Tampa, they might have some rust coming out. They haven't played in over a week, so you can maybe argue that, but I don't know. It's going to catch up with them at some point. They haven't been the best. They found ways to win. I'll give them credit, but they haven't played great in these series they've been in.
My thing is, Tampa just dominated.
They are.
Florida.
Tampa and Colorado, we talked about this last week. I want to see this matchup in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yes.
They've been the two best teams all year. Hockey needs that, to have the two best teams consistently the whole year. You're having a team that came in won the last two cups. Colorado's been trying to get there. They should have won a couple of the last couple of years. They've been trying to get there. That's what I want to see.
Well, let's hope we do, because that's the setup that needs to happen. Let's talk about the game going on tonight. Edmonton at Colorado, game 1. I can already tell you, I think Matt is taking the Oilers in this series. I don't know that for a fact, but if I had to guess, Matt's taking the Oilers in 6. He's been very high on this team, and if the Oilers are going to win, it's going to be a late series. They're not going to take this one and just shove it over Colorado in a quick series like that. It's not going to happen against this team. They're too good, too talented. But Edmonton, they showed up. They showed up down there, taking on Calgary and dominating that series, taking down the LA Kings. But I think it's been one of the easier paths for teams through the NHL playoffs. I mean, we haven't even had to talk about the Oilers because it was kind of a set after we saw the struggles of Calgary in round 1. We knew that wasn't going to be much, but I don't think they've had a hard series. I don't really like what's coming out of the Western Conference right now, even with Colorado and the Oilers. Just the gauntlet the East is going through right now, those teams are looking lethal, and I'd probably take whoever comes out of the East as the Stanley Cup champion, even if the Rangers end up playing 21 games by the time they even get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. The West is looking like, it's easy rides, and sometimes you get those easy rides and then things get hard, and those teams, they don't flip around quick enough. I'm concerned about that, but with the way both these teams have gone, Colorado, playing at home especially, they have just been phenomenal. They're such a phenomenal hockey team right now, and it's hard to say that they're not going to win this.
It's very hard
they
to
won
say
their last opener series against the Blues. They got forced into overtime. They won the Predators game 1, 7-2. This team just knows how to start off with the win, and that's important going into this. You have to start off with that win. Get that first game momentum, defend home ice. If you can't defend home ice in the first game, the Oilers are taking both of these. If they can find your weakness in game 1, say adios to game 2.
And I think that adds to what we've said with the Golden State Warriors, that they know how to win Game 1. At Tampa Bay
Yeah.
Lightning, on the other side of this bracket, they know how to win Game 1s. But I think with Edmonton, too, they showed me something in the last series against the Flames. Not a whole lot, because we were kind of questioning the Flames going into that. But, Edmonton's it's kind of the same thing I've been saying with the Rangers, but not entirely similar, that they played a 7-game series in the first round. They had a quick one in the second round. So they played a lot of games, but like you said, Colorado's just better. And I think that, they've shown these, and they can score on you quickly. They could grind it out. They could win it any other way. So I think it's going to be an interesting series. Since it's tonight, I'll give my series prediction. I'm going to go. I'll go Colorado in 6. I'll flip what I think Matt would say with Edmonton in 6. I'll go Colorado in 6.
I feel like I've been taking a lot of quick series here in the NHL, especially. So I'm going to actually force this a full 7-game set, and
I can see it.
I think you go down 7 games. As much as I like Colorado and I think I want them to win this, I'm going Oilers. I don't know why. I can't give you great reasonings. They shouldn't be the team, but I'm giving it to Edmonton. They're a scrappy team that has kind of hit their stride, I think is what I'm going for here. They've hit their stride in these last 2 series, and I think that makes them dangerous. They know what they're doing, and they are doing everything the way they want to. That Calgary series, they destroyed one of the best offenses the NHL has seen in quite some time. They're going to go up against Colorado, who's a better overall team, but I got the Oilers, and I got them taking this in 7.
That's fair, and I like the way the Oilers have responded since the start of that Flame series. And me and you were both questioning both those teams, but especially Edmonton, that they had that shaky first round series against the Kings team that got rid of a bunch of guys. So I don't it felt kind of iffy that they were in that 7-game series, but and Colorado's not untouchable. I'm not saying they are, because me and Matt have discussed all year that the Eastern Conference was a lot stronger on paper, and it has shown that in these playoffs. But so maybe that's part of it, that Colorado really hasn't gotten challenged too much in these playoffs, going against Nashville in the first round that they swept, and then made it a quick series against Blues. I think it was in 6 games, I think. So, yeah, it's been pretty quick going for them. I think it's going to get harder, but they're not untouchable. And I'm not trying to say that, but I think they're on this matchup, they're the better team.
All right. Well, those are our picks for the lone NHL game going on tonight. Tampa and the Rangers will get things started tomorrow in the Eastern Conference at 8 p.m. Come back for the show tomorrow. We'll tell you about that one. Let's go into some baseball here, Mike, to wrap out the show for the 31st of May. Baseball. Mike, why don't you get us started here?
On anything? Or
doing? Just anything here, baseball. How about the Pirates? What have they been up to?
You ready for this?
Go for it.
They beat the Dodgers again last night.
I don't understand how they're doing it.
I don't know how.
I knew that's where you were going to go with it. So, yeah, I mean.
That's 4 games against them this year. They won 3 of them. They got another one tonight and another one tomorrow.
My biggest thing with this Dodgers team this year, all the numbers, and I'm a number guy, say that this Dodgers team is the best team in baseball by a long shot. Nobody's numbers compare to this. Not even the Yankees do. They have a run differential right now of 118. 118.
That's got to be the league leader.
That they're a good team. But what doesn't tell you they're a good team is they have had the single easiest schedule in all of baseball. And that is not even close. They have played, right now, in the 48 games they have played, only 7 of them have a winning record. Only 7. Every other team in baseball has done at least double digits against teams over 500. The Dodgers have the easiest schedule in baseball, and they're still losing to Pittsburgh. These numbers are when we tell you statistics don't paint the whole picture. They can. Statistics sometimes can give you a very clear picture of what's going on. But other times, it can bring you into a false sense of security and make you think one thing when it's not true. The Dodgers this season have gotten things easy. They look great because they have played no one. If right now the Dodgers win in a 7-game series against Toronto, who's the 3rd seed in the East, I'll tell you this, I think I'd take Toronto.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say because I think that goal goes 7 games, by the way, to do it because the Dodgers are still really good. You've seen that because they dominated these games that they should have won, and they did. But they have, 14 losses against teams under 500 and 27 wins.
I think this kind of helps your argument here is that they've had some great teams over these last couple years. They've had teams that won over 100 games, at 100 games, and now we have that one World Series to show for it. Yeah. As much as we sit here and say, they're so unstoppable.
Love the Dodgers. Stats love Dodgers. Statistically, the Dodgers are the best team of this generation.
And writers love the Dodgers. Baseball people love to talk about them, but it's
baseball's such a numbers game.
It is. They're obsessed with that.
You can look at these teams.
Dude, they're making so many metrics and stats in baseball the last couple of years. I'm like, why do they even have this? Because they love numbers, and they love any type of number that benefits a certain team, like in this case the Dodgers. But no, it's hard to say, as much as we sit here and say how unstoppable they are and they get everybody, teams beat them in the playoffs. Some teams find a way to beat them.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not confident in this year's Dodgers squad, especially with the way that Pittsburgh, a team that, they're doing better than they have in the last couple seasons, and I'll give them credit for that, but they're still not a team that should be beating the Dodgers. No, nobody really should be a team beating the Dodgers, especially not the way Pittsburgh is doing it. The fact that the Dodgers have 14 losses this year against teams under 500, I think is almost worse than the 27 wins they have against teams under 500. So really their record, if you look at this, against bad teams is 27-14. Which is still fine. It's a good number to have. I mean, going at 666, they'd still be up there as the best team in the NL West. But my whole thing going into the month of this May, I told you the schedules were going to even out and teams were going to get those harder matchups. And that's pretty much happened in every other division of baseball except for this one, the NL West, specifically the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Rockies. Mm-hmm. They have had an easy month of May, and the Rockies still found a way to blow it. By the way. They're finally under 500 now over there in the NL West. But the Dodgers, they took advantage of what they needed to. They got the job done, but I still don't think that they are as good as the numbers say.
And
I'm not a guy that goes against the metrics very often.
Yeah.
I love the numbers on this show.
I know you do. But, the big thing is that I noticed last night. So I watched the first couple innings, and when I went to bed, Pirates were up 3-0 or 4-0. Dodgers made their run. They came back and tied it, but I saw the end of the game highlights. The big thing is that they took the lead 5-4 in the top of in the bottom of the eighth. Pirates come back and they put up 2 runs to win the game. You don't see that the last couple of years, and that's a big reason why it hurt them letting Kenley Jansen walk. Kenley Jansen's there, it probably doesn't happen. Especially against this Pirate team that does not hit the ball that much. That's a big thing there for the Dodgers. And another thing for the Pirates, too, they're 20-21 against teams that aren't – they've lost 6 games against the Brewers. So if you take those 6 games out, they're 20-21. So it's as bad as they are on paper, 20-27 right now, I'll take that.
But especially here's the other thing for you, though, for the Pittsburgh Pirates, and a good upside. They've had one of the hardest schedules so far. They have 23 games against teams over 500. You compare that to the 7 of the Dodgers, and Pittsburgh's looking pretty good, despite the fact that your bullpen is flat out terrible right now against these teams. They're putting up awful numbers. Your bullpen is about as bad as Cincinnati's, and that's going to be a problem if they want to turn the season around. They have to figure that out. Their home and away splits I'm not too concerned about, especially with the fact that they've played so many over 500 teams, but they have as many wins against 500 teams as the Dodgers do. It's probably not going to stay that way. But to me, Pittsburgh is actually having a pretty good season, especially compared to
what I expected. After losing 101 games last year, 2027, I'll take it. They're probably going to fall apart at some point.
I think for a Pirates fan this year, if you stay at 400, I think that's a successful year. If you can go 400 after the deficit that we saw last season.
I told you last week, and I told you even parts of last year, this is a year that I wanted to see them bring up some young guys. They haven't brought up everybody, especially the ones I want to see up here, but they brought up 4 guys last week. If you're gonna lose, I want to see you lose with your young guys. And I told you that last week. That's my view that coming into the season. Like, hey, they're gonna be bad, but I want to see how these young guys do. If they develop, how long it takes them to develop, if they can compete, make a name for themselves. Some of them are doing that. I mean, they had a young guy, Marcano, last night, hit a 3-run homer to go up 3-0. If they're gonna do that, let's see what they got. I mean, some of them are capable of doing stuff that guys on the roster, like you talked about with Miami, you gotta have old guys on the roster that are contributing, taking spots away from young guys. That's what Pittsburgh has done to start this year. They haven't done nothing to move on from them. You got guys, there's always somebody behind somebody to fill in.
Yeah. I mean, Baltimore, they made their change, and they're 5-5 in their last 10. So you got to give credit to some of these teams willing to make change-ups, especially like Cincinnati. They had the worst starts of the year, probably one of the history of baseball's worst starts, and they made their change-ups. You know, they moved things around. They weren't going to be complacent. And I think every sports writer would have told you Cincinnati, starting 2-19, their season was over.
Yeah.
You know, there was no coming back. And, you know, there probably isn't a coming back. They're already 15 games behind first place. But they're getting the benefit. You still got, 4 or 5 months left in the season?
Yeah.
So there's plenty of time. There's plenty of time for Cincinnati, not maybe to make a full comeback, but to at least make the numbers better because they're almost out of last place. Chicago has done terrible. They've lost their last 3. Cincinnati can jump them here in probably the next 2 weeks. And if they can jump Chicago, and they can jump Pittsburgh, and they find themselves in the 3 spot right now of the NL Central, which isn't saying a lot because the NL Central is top heavy this year. Bottom 3 teams are definitely bottom 3. But the fact that Cincinnati at this point can get out of that hole, I think, you know, it's a bright spot for every other team right now in baseball.
Yeah, and I think, though, Cincinnati, it's not shocking that they're turning things around. Because I was shocked the way they started because their roster's not that bad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other teams that are worse than them that have worse rosters that started out better than them. So the fact they're turning around, like you said, and I'm not surprised because baseball's a long season. Like you keep hitting on, you're going to have a run where somebody's sliding and you're catching fire. I mean, 16-31, it's not good, but compared to where they were, they've only lost 22 games. They've only lost 9 games since then.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good. But Mike, let's finish out the show here. Last couple of minutes. Beast of the week. I gotta take us into the minor leagues here this past week, down in Canal Park in Akron. Guardians prospect George Valera had a 472-foot home run in Canal Park, knocked it not only out of the park, but onto the bridge behind the park, which I don't know how many of you have been to Canal Park. He had to hit it over the scoreboard to put it onto the bridge and nearly went into a parking deck on the other side. That is a long ways away, and Canal Park's built down in a hole. So he had to hit this thing not just a long way, he also had to get it to the point that it was going up. If there wasn't a bridge there and this was, you know, a flat region that Canal Park was built in, this home run probably goes a little bit further too. And he did this 4 days ago. It came off the bat at 110 miles an hour. And I was thinking about home runs this past weekend because Jesus Sanchez, the center fielder for the Marlins, hit the longest home run of the 22 season with a 496-foot moonshot. But he also did it in Colorado, so you know a little bit of leeway there. He did it in Coors Field, so they get a little bit more leeway there. So I'm going with the 472-footer coming off the bat of George Valera, Akron Rubber Ducks player, Guardians prospect. Keep an eye out because that is insane. But that doesn't hear it for the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm Alec Murna. That has Mike Wolfgang. Power Hour returns next here on your Sports Network.